And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And Emma Raducanu's historic US Open victory earlier this month should have been celebrated simply, right? It was a great sporting triumph for the teenage superstar and indeed Britain, because this is a brilliant British woman. But the woke elite couldn't just be happy for her. No. What the nation saw as cause for celebration, they saw as an opportunity to push their lefty agenda by obsessing over her Chinese-Romanian heritage and the fact she emigrated from Canada. She was 2 years old, though. She was 2 years old. This is a Brit. Remember, London Mayor Sadiq Khan claimed Emma showed the virtue of diversity, while ITV presenter Adol Ray described the win as a victory against the haters, whoever they were. Associate editor of The Spectator, Douglas Murray, has rightly slammed this needlessly toxic woke commentary, saying that by their logic, these people ought to have been thrilled at the news from Dover last week, where almost 1,000 future winners of the US Open crossed the channel in a single day. He added in his latest column, Where Has the Truth Gone?, that it was remarkable that after almost 7 decades, a country like Britain is still incapable of having a discussion about immigration that does not fall into this dishonest binary, and that anyone wary of immigration was being frozen out of the national debate. So I'm delighted to say Douglas is my uncancelled guest tonight. Douglas, do you know the thing, great to have you here, by the way, and the thing that made me so angry about this, Douglas, was an assumption, an absolute assumption in this narrative that Emma Raducanu and her family, as legal immigrants to the UK, would support mass illegal immigration across the Channel. Whereas actually the more illegal immigrants that enter the UK without their papers and that sort of thing, the less immigration there is of brilliant citizens like the Raducanus.
Yeah, that's right. It's great to be with you, Dan. That's completely right. There has been, what I mentioned in this recent column at The Spectator was that it's just so stunning to me that 7 decades, as I said, after mass immigration began into the UK, we still have this kind of unbelievably pre-elementary debate about it, where the fact that Emma Raducanu happens to have been born to parents who migrated to the UK somehow means she has to be used as part of a political football to explain that therefore all immigration is great. And there are lots of things that come in a set of presumptions and claims like that. One of them is that there's sort of no difference, as you mentioned, between legal and illegal immigration. Of course there is. The difference is the law. The second thing is that it sort of suggests that immigration is only a good. And after 7 decades, we should be able to say, yeah, it's got lots of good things in it. And nobody tires of pointing them out. And there are downsides too. And you've got to take the rough with the smooth, the ups with the downs, and that we should by now be able to recognize that. We shouldn't have to pretend, as I said in the column, that everyone, for instance, crossing the Channel into Dover is a future US Open winner, and that basically Britain should announce to the other countries that they shouldn't bother sending anyone to the US Open in future. It will be a totally British-dominated podium for the rest of time. These are sort of just nursery-like fallacies, and I'm just stunned that they keep being trotted out after all of these years, because the public know better than this. We know it's a complex picture. We're not just bigots in waiting who have to be sort of hit with a stick to get into line with all of the pabulum you hear from figures like those that I quoted in my piece and you just quoted. But it's not just this. This is an example of the fact that on issue after issue in modern Britain, we seem to be totally incapable of being treated like adults and having conversations that adults should be able to have.
No, you're completely right. And actually, that's one of the reasons, Douglas, why everyone should read your brilliant book, The Strange Death of Europe, where you do have an honest conversation about immigration, both legal and illegal, and you actually travel to the parts of Europe where the illegal immigrants are coming in, and actually, I think you very fairly examine the pros and the cons, but it does feel like we can't have that conversation. And I think the other thing that really offended me about the Raducanu situation is that it's Emma Raducanu's situation to talk about her heritage. That's her right. But actually, as someone who moved to the country at 2 years old, she's made it pretty clear that she has a respect for the culture of her parents, but it's not her culture. She's entirely British in her upbringing and her way of life.
Yeah.
And I found it so offensive, the likes of Sadiq Khan putting all of these flags, Romania and Canada and China. And it's like, she spent the entire life that she can remember growing up as a British kid.
Yeah, well, this is commonplace on the left in the UK as around the world, in that you don't see people and as individuals. You see them as basically tools for winning a political war.
Yeah.
You use a talented young tennis player to beat down the supposed racists, which allegedly fill every corner of British life, and we still have to be corrected with this presumption, this terrible, slanderous presumption about the British people. People like Raducanu are just used by the left as tools. And of course, as we all know, when they fail to completely fill their presumed role, the left turns on them. If a Raducanu says, if she was to say, look, I'm British and I just don't want to be treated like this, they'd call her a sellout. As many guests on your program can observe, this happens on issue after issue, because none of it's really about the identity issues they pretend it's all just about brute politicking. And they use race and immigration when it suits them. And if an immigrant happens not to parrot all the correct left-wing pabulum about immigration, then they're not the right type of immigrant, and on and on. And that's a game the left has been playing for years. It's the one it's still playing. I just think more people should say how bored of it we are.
No, indeed. And Dr. Sperry, why do you think that we are unable to have a rational conversation about the illegal immigration across the Channel? It's really concerning. These are record numbers. And if you are looking at this simply from a humanitarian perspective, then surely you want to stop the boats, because the more and more boats that come in, the more and more it's the people smugglers who benefit. And the more and more people's lives are put at risk. But genuinely now, if you are a high-profile person, you can't say anything about wanting to stop these boats without being accused of racism.
Well, you can, and people should, because they shouldn't be cowed and they shouldn't be bullied by fools and frauds, which is what has been happening for years. There's no reason why we should be bullied into saying things that we don't believe or being silent about things. So I simply encourage people not to be bullied by the strange group of weirdos who try to police our culture. But on the substantial point, yes, what's happening at Dover is a mini version of what I saw across Europe and North Africa and the Middle East in 2015 with the migration crisis into southern Europe then. It's a mini version of exactly the same problem. And it's a version of a problem, to extrapolate it out a bit, which you see across the developed world at the moment. It's the same in America. The southern border of America has a massive migrant surge of illegal migrants at the moment, and America is struggling to know what to do with it. And there's a reason in this which we have to confront. You see, our government, particularly this government, sort of hopes that we can forget about this. They make occasional sort of right-wing noises in order to placate their voter base, and then they ignore them the next few years. The presumption of the British government is that although there are a few people who will bang on about it, this problem can basically be kept away. It can't be solved, they think, wrongly. I set out recently how they could solve it. But they think it can't be solved, and that although it'll bubble along, it won't get to any extreme that means they actually have to do things that would hurt their own self-image. But this is the problem that all developed countries have, because there are a great set of problems in the world at the moment. And one of them, which has happened in all our lifetimes, is that people in all of the benighted parts of the world, which much outnumber the less benighted parts of the world, see how we live in countries like Britain, see our great good fortune, see the great good fortune that it is to be born in a country like Australia or Britain or America in the 21st and late 20th century. These people from all around the world can see that, from across Africa, from sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, the Middle East, the Far East. People from a bewildering number of countries that I've met on my travels all know that their lives could be better if they made it into, for want of a better term, the West. And they're right, and I understand it, and we all understand it. And at the same time, anybody who analyzes this problem must accept that there is no way that all these people can come. That the hundreds of millions of people across sub-Saharan Africa alone who would like to move to Europe can't come. That the hundreds of millions of people across the world who live in terrible economic deprivation cannot just move to the West. And this is a great tragedy for them. It may be a great tragedy for the whole world, but it's also the fact. And I'm just stunned by the fact that in country after country, even after all these years, we can't have a discussion about this which accepts these problems, accepts these facts. What we have instead are these sorts of band-aid things. For instance, the British government says, well, we have an asylum system, but then it allows basically a parallel system which is first over the English Channel in a rubber dinghy competition. It's a lamentable thing to encourage. It's a dangerous thing to encourage. And there is no end to the number of people who can come. That's just a very basic fact, and one which our political leaders, even after all these years, can't face up to. Because, among other things, they are policed and shackled by small numbers of highly ideologically motivated individuals who believe that they can throw out the most unpleasant accusations against anyone who doesn't fulfill their own left-wing ideological worldview.